Good evening. I want to welcome everybody to the February program for the Whatcom County Historical Society. I'm Wes Ganaway, the president of the society. I don't have a whole lot of news tonight, so what I will do now is tell you about next month's program when Anna Booker will be giving a talk on the Belingham waterfront. And then in April, on April 8th, Brian Griffin will give a talk on the Donovan Diaries. This is a project that Brian's been working on for a number of decades now, and this will probably be the ultimate talk on Donovan. So without further ado, I want to introduce Janette Gomes about her talk on the Washington State Regional Archives. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes, for the introduction and for the invitation this evening. Thank you also to the Whatcom Museum for this lovely virtual space tonight, and to the museum's Drew Watley for handling our technical issues for us. I do understand that people watching will have access to chat. I will not have access to your chat, so the best thing to do if you have questions for me is to email them to me. I will have a slide with my email address. But go ahead and talk among yourselves, and we'll get started. If you're ready, let's go. This talk was billed as being about Washington State's Northwest Regional Archives, and while we do informally refer to our facility that way, we are officially known as the Washington State Archives Northwest Regional Branch, which helps place us in the context of the whole state archive system. If you haven't visited us before, the branch is located here in Belingham on the Western Washington University campus, on the southwest corner of 25th Street and Bill McDonald Parkway, across from the Buchanan Towers. Before I get into more detail about our facility, I'd like to provide a quick overview of our agency and division. The State Archives is one of 5 divisions of the Secretary of State's office. Also known as the Archives and Records Management Division, it's a public trust administered by Secretary of State Kim Wyman and by State Archivist Steve Excel. The Archives includes a facility for state government archival records in Olympia, 5 regional branches spread across the state holding mostly local government archival records, the Digital Archives, which holds electronic copies of state and local records, and the Records Management Office, which helps government agencies with records management questions and works on development of government records retention schedules. We also have a records center in Tumwater where state agencies can store records, Imaging Services, which offers scanning services to government agencies, and the Security Microfilm Office, also known as the Central Records Protection Program, which stores microfilm copies of records for government agencies as backup in case of loss or destruction of the originals. Our storage areas for archival records across the system are temperature and humidity controlled to help preserve the records. We like to go back to the Digital Archives a lot because it's a really handy online resource for people looking for records from all across the state. It holds a combination of born digital and scanned documents, including some records from our local collection. If you haven't already, please check it out. It's easy to find just by searching online for Washington State Archives. To provide a little more context for our branch's placement in the State Archives system, the regions are split up along county lines, even though we hold records from all different levels and types of local government agencies. That includes county offices, cities, towns, schools, fire, and other junior taxing districts. As you can see, the Northwest region encompasses the 7 most northwestern counties of the state. Our other regions include the Puget Sound region, with King, Kitsap, and Pierce counties, and the Southwest, Central, and Eastern regions. 4 of our facilities are on college campuses to allow for cooperative agreements with the colleges. Just as our branch is located on the WWU campus, our Puget Sound branch is on the Bellevue College campus, Central is on the Central Washington University campus in Ellensburg, and our Eastern branch is in the same facility as the Digital Archives on the campus of Eastern Washington University in Cheney. Our one regional facility that is not on a college campus is Southwest, which is in the same building as our state records facility in Olympia, located on the Washington State Capitol campus. A few of the main functions of all of us across the state archive system are to provide access to and preserve archival records and to assist state and local government agencies with records management. We also do outreach like this to help get the word out that Washington's archival records are available for public use. One way in which the Northwest branch is unique among the regional facilities is that we are not only located on a college campus, but we share our interior building space with university programs. We share with two programs, both of which are part of Western's Heritage Resources, which is in turn part of Western Libraries. One of the programs in our building is the Center for Pacific Northwest Studies. Our archival collections provide a nice complement to each other because the center collects private records, such as family papers and business records. We also work with the center on some of their outreach activities with Western students, including having classes visit the archives to learn about our collections and see what we do. When we are back up on a normal schedule after COVID, we will also be happy to host gatherings of groups like the Historical Society and give behind-the-scenes tours. Also providing a nice complement to our collections is our other building partner, WWU's University Archives and Records Management, which of course has archival records from various university departments, programs, and instructors. Having three distinctly separate archives that are run separately and have entirely different collections in the same building is sometimes confusing for our researchers, who tend to contact one of us about items from one of the other collections. But it is also convenient one-stop shopping if you're working on research with relevant records in two or more of the different holdings. Okay, we're getting closer to talking about what you can expect to find at the Northwest branch, but I want to quickly address which records are transferred from government agencies to the state archives. As I mentioned, we collect almost exclusively local government records at the regional facilities. We do have a few related items from private donors, although we do try to make sure that materials from private sources end up with an institution that focuses on that type of collection. The main avenue for getting local government records to the archives is through Washington's government records retention schedules, which list how long different types of agencies are expected to keep their records, and once they can get rid of them, whether these records are designated by the state as archival or not. Here you see one of the first steps that an agency can take online, selecting from a list of agency types to get to relevant retention schedules. Once the agency type is chosen, a list of retention schedules based on office type or functions comes up. Included is a common schedule for records that most types of agencies are likely to have. From there, retention schedules can be searched for the records in question to determine how long the agency is legally required to keep them and whether they need to consult the archives before disposing of them. If the designation for the records is non-archival, which most records are, the agency can dispose of them at the end of their retention without consulting the state archives. If the records are designated either archival, permanent retention, which means that archives will definitely take them when they are ready for transfer, or archival appraisal required, which means an archivist will evaluate the records to determine whether they do have archival value. In overly simplified terms, archival means having enduring historical or legal value. While state government agencies in Washington are required to turn their archival records over to the state archives once their retention has been met, local government agencies are not. They are strongly encouraged to do so and cannot legally destroy the records without receiving an appraisal from the archives that the records are not of archival value. This is a very simplified explanation of why records get transferred to the archives. Of course, it can get much more complicated than that when agencies have trouble figuring out how their records fit into the schedules. When that happens, they contact their regional archivist or a records management office for assistance. Finally, let's start looking at what types of records end up at the archives. You might not find most of them particularly visually appealing or pretty. These two, for example, are Whatcom County Council correspondence and a resolution. For these types of records, and most of the records we have, obviously what the researcher is interested in is content and how the content helps with their research. I find these particularly interesting because if you can make out the text, these are official documents concerning Sasquatch hunting and declaring Whatcom County a Sasquatch protection and refuge area. And I don't mean to single out Whatcom County, although I am focusing on it in this talk in honor of our hosts. There actually are a few other Bigfoot laws and official documents spread across the state. I just find these fun examples of what you might find in seemingly mundane records. This is another typical record for us, governing body proceedings, although a bit earlier. This one is from the Whatcom City Council proceedings, before Belingham was Belingham and was instead composed of separate smaller cities. The interesting thing about this is that with all the talk of 2020 being the centennial of women's suffrage, this documents that there were off and on earlier times in Washington when women could vote. For those who might have trouble reading this, the mayor acknowledges on December 11th, 1883, at the first Whatcom City Council meeting, that he owes his election to women voters. The branch has, by the way, records going back to as early as 1853 and as recent as last year. But the dates and types of records we have from different agencies vary greatly depending on when they transferred their records to us and what records they still had. And the same types of government offices in different jurisdictions transfer different date ranges of the same records. So you can't assume that we have same sets of records from Jefferson County that we have from Whatcom. I hope those first few examples of records give you an idea of how seemingly boring government records can be quite interesting once you get into them. The most popular items with most of our researchers deal with individual rights and activities, largely property ownership, life events such as birth, death, marriage, and divorce, and court cases. We are, though, also visited by professional historians, authors, and academics working on larger research projects that cover diverse records. While we make every attempt to keep our collections as accessible as possible to all researchers, state and federal laws dictate that some types of records are restricted or are only to be accessed by certain parties. We collect restricted archival records in the hope that they will not be restricted permanently, and in some cases, there are time limits on the restrictions. A lot of research at our facility, excuse me, starts with the county auditor's recordings indexes. Organized by dates and names of individuals and organizations, these indexes provide access to a wide variety of documents that were filed with the auditor's office to ensure that an official record was kept of individual rights and responsibilities. Here we see what is a somewhat unusual record to find in the auditor's mining claims volumes, a sketch of the area in which a mining claim was filed in 1892, the sulfide mining district. Most mining claims consist only of text. Also pictured is an example of how a notary's signature and seal at the bottom of a document were transcribed into an auditor's volume for the official record. The original document would have gone to one of the parties involved. Below that is a document transferring stock in the Puget Sound Coal Mining Association, and then a land patents volume. Well, those of you familiar with the land patent or homesteading process will know that those would have been officially federal documents that can also be researched through the National Archives or the Federal Bureau of Land Management. County auditors also typically kept local transcriptions of the transfer of homestead land from the federal government to private individuals. Another popular item that we have at the branch, registers. We have lots of different kinds that provide usually one line of information about individuals or companies. This is a Whatcom County Register of Births, but we also have them for deaths. We have teacher, physician, dentist, optometrist, midwife, attorney, and notary registers, jail registers, marriage registers, etc. I'm not going to say you name it, but we have a lot of different kinds from earlier times when registers were the norm. These can be a great source for genealogists trying to confirm an ancestor's rumored occupation, or for researchers working on a particular profession or individual in that line of work. I have a few more examples of other types of records that are popular with our researchers. Many of the numerous marriage records requests we receive are for one of the parties to the marriage themselves because they need them for legal reasons, such as applying for Social Security. Of course, older marriage records are a favorite of genealogists or researchers into topics such as interracial marriage. This is an example of a marriage record from 1872. Again, a transcription kept by the county, so there would be an official permanent record of the marriage on file. Another popular record series is naturalization records. If you can see to the lower right of the logo, this declaration of intention to become a citizen of the US is from Michigan, documenting the earlier location of an immigrant who finalized his or her naturalization in Washington. This is also another example of a federal record that was processed locally, resulting in local copies. This school census form helps document the residents' ages and education of a Whatcom County family. You can also see the institutional language and standards of the time, in this case 1922, in the fields at the bottom of the form, where, quote, defective children, unquote, can be listed, along with children unable to attend school with the optional reasons listed. One of our earlier mentioned prison or jail registers, again, a gem for genealogists if they don't mind finding out that an ancestor was a criminal. We also have many election records from our region, which tend to draw some serious researchers. This is a portion of Whatcom County tallies for the election of October 1st, 1889. Ballot items included the state constitution, women's suffrage, prohibition, and the site of the permanent state capitol. We have maps, but unfortunately research with maps can be tricky. They often don't include exactly the type of information a researcher is trying to find, but we do have some created for specific limited purposes, such as this one documenting the platting of the town of Seaholm, filed with the Whatcom County Auditor on May 8, 1858. We have some incidental maps like the ones I showed you earlier of the sulfide mining district, and we have Kroll and Metzger atlases as reference materials in our research room. Although some features may show at least as primitive sketches on some maps, we don't have records such as good detailed railroad maps. But when we don't have something researchers request, we do make an effort to try to refer them somewhere that should have that type of resource. We don't have large collections of ephemera, but we do have incidental items such as flyers and brochures that come in with other records. Many of those types of items are not dated. We know that the Civic Field Complex flyer from Belingham Parks and Recreation was created sometime after the athletic fields were completed in 1981 because it talks about that. If you had the time to spend, you could probably find more clues to narrow the creation date range of the flyer based on other content. As a rule, we do not collect newspapers and avoid most publications, although we do have a few news clipping scrapbooks from agencies that collected articles featuring their communities or the agency's own activities. This is a rare exception that we have of a whole newspaper, which was donated by a private party whose relative attended Whatcom High School. The reason we have it is that it's a school newspaper. We do favor collecting items like this from schools rather than from newspaper publishers, which fall outside our collection scope of local government records. Photographs are, of course, something we get asked for all the time. Unfortunately, as ours usually document some government activity, especially construction projects, and aren't meant to be great artistic compositions, most of them aren't going to win any photography awards. While we do have a few small collections, most photographs are scattered around among other records. This one, showing construction in Maritime Heritage Park in 1998, comes from a collection of photograph scrapbooks put together by Belingham Planning and Community Development. Unlike some collections that seem to be shot after shot of broken ground, the photographer at least managed to get the museum into this one. We have a collection of park histories and reference materials from Belingham Parks and Recreation that includes photographs. Maritime Heritage Park and Whatcom Falls Park are shown here. Photos tend to end up with us with very little information provided. None of these were dated, although again, with some research and by studying them, you can probably come up with approximate date ranges. We also have a great collection from the Belingham Fire Department and a smattering of school photographs from the Northwest Educational Service District, various school districts and schools. Here we see a hearing test program at New Halem School around 1947 and sixth graders at Lincoln School in 1950. One of the perks for me in preparing for this talk was that I found some fun photos I didn't know we had. This and the next one came from an original copy we have of A Brief History of the Mount Baker School District, written by the retired first superintendent of the district, M.C. Olmsted, in 1956. This one is identified as the Hardin School in Maple Falls in 1891, and this undated one of Bell Creek School. Since I've mentioned a couple of times that our government records can appear visually uninteresting, I also wanted to note that we occasionally find a frilly, fancy, unique item among our other records. This is an Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition Silver Medal Diploma awarded to Whatcom County Public Schools for a collective school exhibit. I'd like to talk a little bit about the types of preparation that will help you and us if you decide to visit and view some of our pretty records in person. At the moment, because of COVID, we are not accepting visitors or making appointments for research, but we are helping researchers remotely by responding to emails and phone calls. For requests that are not too time intensive, we are able to find the records and email or mail copies. 3 of our other regional facilities are open by appointment only at this point, and we may be soon too. If you'd like to do some research at our facility when we reopen, here are some helpful things you can do before your appointment. If working on a topic that is likely to have already been researched and written about, please check secondary sources such as books to get more details about what records you should review. You can also prepare by checking the relevant state archives web pages. I specifically want to note Family Search and Ancestry.com here because both sites have digital images of some of our earlier records, especially those of interest to genealogists. Volunteers associated with these sites have been sent to our facilities at various times to scan our records for posting on these sites, and in most cases, they are great quality scans. In some cases, they have been indexed and can be found through name searches. In other cases, they have not and have to be found by browsing through the sites. If you're familiar with those sites, it's a good idea to remember them as another resource for some of our records. Also, make sure you talk to us directly. We suggest checking the digital archives again because, as I mentioned earlier, some of our records have been scanned and are available there for viewing and downloading free of charge, unless you need a certified copy, for which there is a charge. If there isn't a free image available there, sometimes there's at least an abstract or index entry, which will have details that will help us find the record here. You can see here that the digital archives has a few different search options on its simple search screen. This, for example, is an 1899 marriage return I found on the digital archives by searching for John Smith in the name search fields, then choosing marriage records as the record series, selecting Whatcom County, and then browsing through the results for an old one to show you. Another way to search on the digital archives is to browse through the list of collections online by choosing collections from the top menu, selecting record series from the drop-down, then choosing a collection to see what titles are available under that collection. In this instance, audio records has been selected on the left to make the available titles appear on the right. This is an undated image from our Port of Belingham collection, most of which is available on the digital archives, and can be accessed by choosing photographs from the list of collections, then choosing Port of Belingham photograph collections from the list of titles, then using keyword or date range searches to look for specific subjects. You can also visit the main Washington State Archives webpage before you make an appointment to get an idea of the types of records we have in our collections. The State Archives homepage has an Archives Catalog button, which will get you to this page, where you can enter keywords and do a broad search across all the State Archives physical collections. And I say physical because this does not include the digital archives records, just paper and other physical media. You can also narrow to the regional branch of interest or the state facility by using the collections drop-down field or choosing a region from the map. Don't worry about trying to follow or write all of this down. It's fairly self-explanatory once you get to the site. If you find that not to be true, there is also an Ask an Archivist button on our pages, and you're always welcome to contact us directly. We also have our own webpage for the branch where you can view a listing of our collections. You can find us through the branches drop down at the top of the State Archives pages. The one caution I would give about using the web pages exclusively without talking to us is that we are constantly adding to our collections. Something may have just come in that doesn't show up on our site yet, and we'd hate for you to miss the opportunity to see those records that weren't listed when you looked. And as you can see by this slide, sometimes we have glitches, which is another good reason to talk to us. Our record groups box should show a listing of the agencies for which we have records, and the subgroups box should show what particular offices in those agencies records came from. But this is what was going on when I set these slides up. The Ask an Archivist button is still there, or even better, you can email or call us and tell us about your research and what you're trying to find. I'm happy to report that glitch seemed to be a partial day event, and when I checked earlier, our records group and subgroups were visible. When we are able to have on-site researchers again, especially until things return to normal, we will ask that you make an appointment at least 24 hours in advance. When we are open, we set appointments for Wednesday through Friday only to allow our small staff a couple of days to work on other projects. Of course, with social distancing, we'll set fewer appointments than normal and ask that researchers come alone if possible. We also ask the standard COVID health questions before allowing anyone into the research room. If you are familiar with archives in general, you know there are also standard security measures we follow, such as no food, drink, or pens, only pencils in the research room, and purses and bags go into lockers. We are not trying to be mean, we are only protecting our unique collections. We also ask that, at least for now, you make another appointment if you need to look at additional records, which you discover during your visit there. You can bring in your own camera, laptop, phone, etc., as long as you silence the phone and don't use any kind of harmful scanning equipment on fragile records. We do allow you to take your own photos of the records in lieu of copies, which our staff has to provide for you, and which can take some time depending on how many you need. When you visit the branch as a researcher, you will come through our lobby and end up in the research room, where you will review the records you have requested. We have some great reference materials in the research room that aren't technically part of our collection, but can also be very helpful with research. We don't by any means have complete sets, and you can probably find many more of these in the libraries, but you are welcome to view what we have during your visit. Finally, a quick word about volunteering for us. Sometimes people get really excited to learn that we're here and want to jump in and help, and we love that. But at the moment, again, because of COVID, we have only our 3 permanent staff members working in the building. That's myself, Allison Costanza, the archivist who responds to most of our research requests, and Molly Rooney, our senior records consultant, who focuses mostly on records management. We have several great long-term volunteers, but for everyone's protection, they are not working in the building right now. There is an opportunity called Scribe to work online from the safety of your own home, indexing archival records for the state archives, so that those records can be posted and searchable on the digital archives. You can find Scribe by searching on Washington State Archives Scribe, and it should be one of the first things that pops up. Thank you so much for joining us. The State Archives in the Northwest Branch appreciate the interest, and we look forward to hearing from you if you have questions about our records. The State Archives does also have a digital newsletter that anyone can subscribe to for free to learn more about our activities around the state. If you aren't already a subscriber, you can find a link to the subscription form and old editions of the State Archives newsletter on the Archives homepage. Thank you, and have a good night.